introduce Aaron, who is our next speaker. And Aaron is a security services delivery manager at Truist Financial Corp. And Aaron is closely involved with the Carolinas Cloud Security Alliance chapter, as well as Security B-Sides. And Aaron is a graduate student currently in the MSISE program at the SANS Technology Institute. So I'll be looking to hear how your program is going, Aaron, in the virtual hallway. So I'm going to turn it over to Aaron, and he's going to talk about leveling up your workforce for cloud enablement.
Yeah, I appreciate it. I am just getting my video going here. Appreciate you all having me and for the turnover here. It's a pleasure being here today. Of course, you know, these things are always better in person, but certainly enjoyable on virtual as well. So let me see if I can click in. All right. So Ken introduced me a little bit. As he mentioned, I am a graduate student of the SANS Technology Institute in the MSISE program, the Information Security Engineering program, for those of you who aren't familiar with that. I'm also a business information security manager for Truist, formerly SunTrust, and also formerly BB&T, two regional banks in the East Coast of the United States. And I'm thankful for the company allowing me to give this presentation today. I have too many hobbies, and I probably need to downsize, but I have a lot of interests, and so I enjoy things like amateur radio and some gardening, and also now I've started keeping bees. And you can see my family there, and I used to be a chopper pilot in the Army for that little helicopter you see in the lower or the right hand of the screen there. And I just want to make sure, can you guys see my video?
Yeah, we sure can.
Great, thanks, Ken. All right, so here's a little bit of the agenda we're going to go through today, talking about where we are from a training perspective, where we need to go, and how we one way of getting there. As you know, it's been mentioned in the Slack, the slides are being posted, and I also have a references and kind of resources page I've put together to share as well at the end. So just to kind of declutter some of the slides. And just a quick disclaimer here, nothing here is intended to be legal advice. These are my own opinions. They don't represent SANS or the company, or my company, Truist. And so we'll get started. All right, so I usually try to take a poll here. It's a little bit easier with a live audience, but as I'm talking to audiences, I usually try to find out, you know, from what direction do they approach this talk? Is it from a completely newcomer to our industry in InfoSec, or is it as an individual contributor, maybe your early life cycle, mid-career life cycle, or senior, or even a leader? Maybe you're a manager, someone who's looking out for the interests of your people. And so, but I think I have, from being at summits, I think I have a pretty good idea of who most of you are. And, you know, regardless of, probably regardless of which direction you would come at this, the pressure is on, right? I think we've seen that through yesterday's talks, through today's talks, that we used to maybe we used to think that the cloud was kind of uh, a nirvana state, you know, to speak, but over time we've realized there are a lot more problems, and especially as a result of some of the things like breaches, Capital One breach and others that we have we've talked about throughout yesterday and today. So all of that has led to where we are today, and as we're looking at this, how do we advance our skill set? How do we hone our skills, our craft towards approaching all of the various problems that are related to the cloud? That's very important to inform that. So some of you may be familiar with this, cyber domains. They apply across all the different colors that we've talked about, of the workforce, whether it's red, blue, purple, your offensive, defensive, or some combination of the two. And we refer to those as a common body of knowledge. This happens to be the CISSP common body of knowledge. And I bring this up as not as a standard, but as a reference point, because this is something that has been talked about a lot in the industry. A lot of effort has been put into what domains should be covered. And as you can see here, there's weightings applied for the CISSP exam in these various areas, and those weightings are representative of the amount of kind of emphasis placed on that, right? So one of the other tools that's out there is put out by ISSA, the Information System Security Association, and this is a little bit different view angle, right, on a similar problem, and that is the same problem, and that is the cybersecurity career life cycle. And this is really to talk about what are some phases of your life cycle and some of the things throughout that life cycle that that are applicable in that particular phase of life. What are some time frames? So taking a look here, there are plenty of pre-professional folks, students who are maybe not yet practitioners, but they are preparing to enter the field, and then they will, matriculate into this entry level where, all of the things that hopefully we're doing as practitioners come to bear, right? Things like mentorship, things like career advancement through employment opportunities, developing and building into that special interest area that that you might have. And so, as we are moving through here, there are progressively more challenges and more challenging assignments, challenging training opportunities, and that we're going to get back to that a little bit later in this discussion. So this is kind of an eye chart, something I came across not too long ago that was put out on a Reddit, I believe, and by a user called SignCure Life. And this is meant as a talking tool for what are the different maybe areas of discipline, whether it be management, architecture, analysis, defensive operations. You can see those represented vertically. And then some various certifications that fall into those different areas. I think, as with any model, we could probably identify some areas where this model isn't quite perfect, but I think it can serve as a map, or maybe 100,000-foot view of what security certifications are out there, and where do some of these things fit, because sometimes it's just difficult to wrap our heads around where all of these things fit in. So now I want to talk about where we need to go. Now that we've talked a little bit about where we are today. So I had a mentor describe this information security career as a three-legged stool, and that stool the legs could be comprised of a number of different areas. Probably the most common three, or maybe most important, are networking, system administration, and development. And as we're looking at our own skill set, I think it's important to identify that where our strengths and weaknesses are. Does your stool sit level because all the legs are relatively even, or is that one side of the stool a little wobbly because that area is not quite as strong? Not too long ago, I identified that I had a weakness in development, and so I really went after scripting skills and pursuing training in that area. So, for example, I took the GPYC course, and I started working on some side projects just to keep those chops going and to continue learning in that area, because I come primarily from a networking and system administration background. So as we're thinking about the cloud, we've talked over the last couple days, we've heard from presenters about a lot of different pieces of the cloud, whether it be infrastructure as a service, platform as a service, or software as a service, and how we can apply security principles to those different areas. This is a model put out by the Cloud Security Alliance to talk about how do cloud services, how can we rationalize cloud services or think about them from a high level. So think of this as a map of where different types of services fall. So maybe, take for example, we have, an API. Well, that would fall into this infrastructure as a service kind of model, and some of the responsibilities that go along with that we need to keep in mind. And part of the reason that this is important is because as we're approaching, the cloud and cloud services, our skill sets correspond to how those services are delivered. So as we're looking at the overall cloud services, we have a management kind of perspective around that. And that might not just be a management role, but just management of the cloud in general. So what are we doing from a cost optimization perspective? What portfolio of services are we, or what services are in our portfolio that we're consuming? It seems like AWS is always bringing new services to the portfolio, and that's an ever expanding portfolio. So what are we consuming? What could we be consuming? What may we want to stop consuming, and then what business requirements are we fulfilling in the course of that. Next up would be an architectural view of these cloud services and components. So things like functional and security requirements and developing those. How do we want this to work? What controls do we want to put around that? We've heard a lot yesterday and today around specific controls that haven't been addressed that have led to some pretty profound impacts, right? And so identifying those necessary pieces, ensuring those are in place in order to properly secure these from an architectural perspective. And then next up would be our systems. So things like server-based versus serverless. We heard around Kubernetes and K8s, and we also have even heard a little bit about some software-defined networking things. Software-defined networking is integral to the cloud approach, and this in particular can be a very a big shift for folks who have been in networking for a significant amount of time, because the idea of because the concepts change, you know, and things like and familiarizing yourself with things like encapsulation and VXLAN tagging and other things like that becomes very, very important. You know, also things like virtual router formats and transit gateway and other concepts that aren't just net new to cloud, but also relate to how do we integrate our traditional on-prem networks with cloud services. So what's the path from here to there? And then here at the top of the model, we come into a DevOps perspective. And this kind of goes back to the scripting skills that become very important. You know, tools that are written in Python, tools that are extensible in Python and other languages like PowerShell, Ruby. There are a number of others, and concepts like chaos engineering, and even how stress testing and pen testing and other things look a little bit different in cloud environments. So I want to talk a little bit about DevSecops. And that is this melding of development and security from an operational perspective. We touched on it, or you know, we heard a little bit about this, a lot about this the last couple of days, really, around the integration of development and security, from automating policies, putting the power in the hands of developers to be able to go and deploy infrastructure as code, to be able to go and deploy servers and applications based on code. And I can't underemphasize the importance of this, because part of the power of cloud, as you may know, is the ability to move lighter and faster. And so we can have more smaller teams that are able to move our business down the road quicker, be quicker to delivery, faster to delivery in our features, in order to reduce costs and be more competitive. So how do we get there? Do a quick time check here. I think I'm on time. Well, John Chambers Cisco's executive chairman is quoted as saying that 40% of businesses will die in the next 10 years if they don't figure out how to change their company to accommodate new technologies. And I don't think there's an area where this is less true than where this is more true than in our in the cloud. These technologies are very new, and we've seen how that, and new ones are always coming. We've seen how that has led to many difficulties and even data disclosures breaches as a result. And I think that we just have to be reinventing ourselves on an ongoing basis in order to capitalize on these opportunities and to be able to survive long term. All right, so we talked about 10 domains earlier. Here are 6 domains that apply to cloud security, and they're architectural concepts, data security, platform infrastructure security, application security, operations, and legal and compliance. And I think, part of the importance of this common body of knowledge for the cloud domain is that in order to talk about how we address cloud security, we have to assume that there's some underlying knowledge. We talked about the three-legged stool. We talked about the 10 domains of security coming out of the CISSP common body of knowledge. This builds on all of that. So there's an assumption that we already have that foundational work established, that it's known, and that we can build on that from a training perspective. So I don't think anybody here would recommend that people jump right into cloud security as a starting place in their career. I wouldn't. I think that there's a lot that's needed as far as background knowledge. There's certainly a place for lab environments and training environments in the cloud that can enable that foundational knowledge and understanding. And I think we see that in a lot of training courses today. So let's talk a little bit about certifications. I think no one here is probably foreign to certifications. There are a lot of them out there. There are many different views on them, and many of them are competing against each other, as we saw in the eye chart earlier of the security certifications, where there's many there. But I want to talk a little bit about some different approaches to gaining knowledge and skills in cloud through certification. So one of the common themes with cloud certification is that many of these are based on roles, whether it be a security practitioner role, as an individual contributor like an architect or analyst or engineer, a consulting role, perhaps as a manager of people or a manager of a program or project, and also finally as architect, someone who's designing these environments, who's solutioning the requirements, the overlay for these specific environments. One of the certifications out there is the CCSK by Cloud Security Alliance, and it comes in two different formats. One is the foundation course. It's a 1 or 2 day course, and I've heard it said that pretty much anybody with an introduction to cloud services and cloud security is going to have a pretty good feel for that course already, and may want to consider the next kind of level or format of that, which is the CCSK Plus, which is a 2 or 3 day course. And that includes the foundation course plus a number of AWS labs that cover things like dashboard security, roles, VPCs, instances, immutability, and a number of other things which I have listed there. And then the most recent version 4, introduces some new concepts such as container, CI/CD tool chain, DevOps, and even more software-defined networking principles. So again, an important piece of this. So ISC Squared took the CCSK, well, in partnership with Cloud Security Alliance, they took the CCSK and they expanded upon it with some governance and traditional security and privacy concepts to develop their certified cloud security practitioner certification and common body of knowledge. This certification is a little bit more suitable to CISSP holders because, as I mentioned earlier, it assumes that you know the CISSP concepts and knowledge already. For example, the OSI model is not readdressed as a part of this in the course of discussing what encapsulation is and some of the software-defined networking concepts as well. And then we come to vendor specific or platform specific certification. So here is a look at AWS's roadmap as currently published. And you can see that this starts with kind of a foundational cloud practitioner level and works up into associate and professional level certifications, and then branches into specialties like security, database, machine learning, etc. So the recommended path there is to start either here or here and then move over into the specialty at the time that that you're ready. Here's the Azure roadmap. And again, this is role-based. So a path that's been suggested to me is starting with the architect kind of course, and then moving into the engineering course, which is a little bit which is later in the sequence as far as course numbers go. And to me, that was a little bit counterintuitive, and the way I've had it explained to me is that this is designed to give you a top-down approach to the certification and kind of the big picture, and then focusing on more specific topic areas as you go. Finally, we come to the SANS certification, and SANS is doing a lot of work in this area, including the brand new SEC 588 cloud penetration testing in beta. If you're interested in that, good luck trying to get on it. I understand that it's waitlisted for some time, and if you're not already signed up, that is. But one of the things about SANS that I think is good is that this SANS takes an integrated approach to the training, by putting into the courseware the lab modules right along with the learning elements. So as you're going through the courseware, as you know, if this isn't your first round taking training from SANS, then each module, tends to have a corresponding lab. That's much more integrated from a learning perspective than I think you would encounter in some of these other certification programs. And another thing around the SANS training is that even baseline classes like security essentials and leadership essentials include a lot of the cloud topics that we've talked about so far during this summit, and even in even more depth. I use this story to talk about how much work SANS has done in this area. So I initially took Dr. Eric Cole's SEC 401 course in 2006. And as a part of my master's degree with SANS, I needed to have a valid GSEC, and I had let that certification lapse during one of my deployments to Afghanistan. I missed my grace period and all of that jazz. But I retook the course. I think that was last year. So after 12 years, it was amazing to me how much the course had changed, and how much new material that was there. I was not bored. There was plenty for me to capitalize on, and specifically in the area of cloud security. Eric's just added a lot of material there. I know he continues to add. Dr. Cole continues to add a lot of material there. So certainly beneficial. All right, so that brings us to the end of the presentation. I'm a little bit ahead of schedule, and I want to make sure to leave time for, I guess we have plenty of time for Q&A. So
yeah, we got a couple questions here. So Aaron, really good talk to kind of lay out all these different paths for people, and good to see you again. Aaron and I are both in the STI program, so I see him on Slack probably 3 times a week, but
yeah.
Good to see you in person, a good session. So
thanks, Mark.
So the first question we had here is, as companies are moving more towards an all in cloud model, especially small and medium businesses, how do you see that affecting the entry-level requirements for cloud professionals? Will it soon be harder to find an entry-level job if the landscape continues to shift upwards? Which is a really good question.
Yeah. So when I'm talking to candidates, because I'm now a hiring manager, but I used to sit in on a lot of interviews, but when I'm talking to anybody in a mentoring situation about job searches and interviewing, I think the number one thing that I see is that when a candidate is asked a question, they're unable to talk through that concept, right? Or whiteboard that concept, right? Like, so take DNS, for example. If you can't get up in front of a whiteboard and talk about how DNS works from a global perspective, then you may want to do some research and shore up that area of your knowledge. And I think the same thing is true for cloud. So I think the answer is yes, it will be harder to get a job without knowing at least some basic things about the cloud. I think it'll be more difficult depending on the job role to answer those questions without having a deeper knowledge. But I still think that a lot of the courses that are out there, specifically like SEC 401, for example, do a good job of introducing those concepts. And if you can talk about what you learned confidently, that's going to be looked upon, I think, favorably. So I think it will be more challenging. I do think that there's, potential. We've seen, tech skill revolutions, like the career hotness, maybe was being a web application developer in the mid 90s, but now how in demand are, as far as, we still need web application developers, but it's
Right.
not the type of hype that it was then, is what I'm trying to say. And so I think that we could see similar trends with the security industry as well.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, I have, like I said, I'm on the Azure AD team, and we have some people that have joined our org that have come from like different backgrounds of like data science or just all kinds of different stuff. And they don't have a lot of the fundamentals in terms of like, specifically DNS and networking. And I think you're able to kind of get by because you can kind of, get through to just like, make things work when it comes to the cloud side. But having that deeper level understanding of why things are working a certain way. And I think the threats are a little bit different. Like you're probably not so worried about, having an open zone transfer because you don't control that anymore when it comes to some of that stuff, but still having the right records registered and making sure like, why do you have a CNAME record and an A record, all that stuff, that still definitely matters. And I think a lot of the networking stuff that you talked about is just still like core foundational stuff that you're gonna need to know. Like there's everything now is like on a network. It used to be like, well, I just do storage, so like I don't have to worry about that. But now even storage is on, on the LAN. So I agree with you on that. Like I think that really helps. And one of the people I'm working with, she just started doing 401, and she said that it's helped kind of crystallize a lot of the stuff that, she knew that why this is what you got to do, but now she understands why you do it that way. Right. So it's been it's really, really good. Next question is kind of similar, is how do you see the same skills and solutions aligning to small or medium businesses? So I guess maybe for this one, like, is there something you think that might be something that people should, for the small, medium businesses, that they should try to go learn first or anything like that? Because there's a lot in that chart. Like that eye chart just has so many certifications in so many different areas. Like, is there anything you think maybe people could kind of start with to kind of align?
For employees in a small, medium business, is that kind of what you're saying? Or
yeah, they're saying, how do you see these same skills and solutions aligning with the smaller, medium businesses?
Yeah. So I used to work for a managed service provider that catered mainly towards small and medium business. And it was a hybrid and public, private hybrid public cloud mix from that service provider. And so I would say the full spectrum was leveraged. And one of the things that I learned in that role is that there is such a thing as a security poverty line. And what I mean by that is that small and medium businesses, their tolerance for exorbitant expenses is much, much lower. I heard a stat once, and I know 98% of all statistics are made up, but I heard a stat that I think there's something probably to, and that is that 60% of small and medium businesses who experience a catastrophic data loss through hardware failure or through a crypto ransomware event will be out of business within 2 years. I think that's probably a true statistic. And so when I think about scaling for a small or medium business, I think about it more on a how do you eat the elephant perspective. And I really think you still start small. You start at the beginning and you work your way up. And some of it goes back to that maturity model, like the CMMI maturity model. And where do you start? You start by establishing some things. taking those top list of misconfigurations that you've learned about during this and building them into some kind of policy or target architecture or standard for your organization, where you can have an agreement about, where can we start? What's our tolerance level? What can we do now? And then kind of mature as we go. And I think you see that with security awareness programs as well, right? You can't just throw everything on from the get-go.
Yeah, I always joke that the sweet spot to be is like the lowest enterprise, because you have the budget to like go buy some of the enterprise class tools, but you don't have to like deploy to 300,000 endpoints all over the globe. Like it's much more usable. I do think, I think the skills are going to be similar. Like you said, I mean, the days of people running the one admin running their own Exchange server and domain controller and SharePoint site like all in one box, like for the 25 people in the office, like those days are long gone, right? And I think there's probably a lot more value into it as to what you said. But I think thinking about those SaaS apps and like how do you secure that data and how do you drive value back into the business, I think there's still plenty of IT work to go do and security work to go do, but just you're probably not configuring VLANs and defragging Exchange databases and backups and stuff like that anymore.
Yeah.
All right, 2 more questions and I think we're getting very close to breaking for lunch. I'm not sure if you're able to answer this one, but is looking at the DoD 8140, it seems to be very lean in terms of focused, modern cloud-based security. Do you think SANS certs on DevOps may see some traction in the future? I'm not sure if you have a opinion on that. This is totally outside my space, so I'm interested to hear what you
SANS certs on DevOps. I would. I think one of the things that I've noticed is that the demand definitely drives courseware. Seems to drive courseware development, right? Many course authors have their own firms, or they are principals in firms that are consulting for large organizations, and they're integrating that knowledge back into the courseware, right? So I don't think government sector is any exception. As far as the DoD standards being lean on cloud-based security, I would say that that's certainly an opinion. I don't have an opinion on that, but I do know that Department of Energy has been a leader in the go to cloud space. And that's very interesting because energy is very on-premise compute focused, supercomputing, large data centers. And that's probably about all I can say about that. But I think that, DoD has also changed their philosophy, as financial services has changed their philosophy about whether they're a cloud last or a cloud first, so to speak, type of entity.
Yeah,
so I think it'll
this
mature.
Last summer. Yeah, I think last summer the UK government folks like had some like Office 365 security recommendations and stuff like that. So I think they're probably you're probably right. They're kind of catching up.
Oh, and we've seen big contracts awarded this year as well. Right.
Yes, so that's a lot going on with that. Okay,
Yeah.
last one, and then I'll kick you to everyone to the team's channel for any other questions. So this is kind of a leading question, but is with misconfigurations regularly ranking among the top reasons for cloud breaches, how pivotal is it for organizations to ensure they have workforce development as part of their cloud migration adoption strategy?
Yeah.
I mean, it seems to me, you got to know this stuff, right, to configure correctly. Yeah,
Go
there's
ahead,
a lot
Mark.
in there. So
yeah,
sure. So I mean, I think it's absolutely critical. Like we've seen how complex some of the stuff is. Like, I mean, some of the stuff we've seen the last couple of days, I didn't even know existed. And I mean, I'm very siloed in my identity space, so I'm very familiar with like the OAuth, consents and stuff like that. But there's other things I have no idea, and I just can't imagine how how you could expect people to just like stand this stuff up and like hopefully be correctly and secured like out
Yeah.
of the box. It just seems like
Yeah.
it's not possible.
I think knowledge sharing is critical. It's one of the reasons why I recently joined the Cloud Security Alliance board locally here.
Cool.
I think it's if you have something to contribute to the shared pool of knowledge, talk to your org about doing a lunch and learn. Talk to your org about no joke. Take what you learned during this summit. Take what you learned have learned or do learn whenever you learn it. Take it back to your org and say, hey, can I do a short presentation on this to share what I've learned? I don't know it all, but
Yeah.
let me share what I've learned with other people and just contribute to that shared pool of knowledge. I think that's a great place to start from workforce development. I don't think it's got to be I don't think it has to be expensive for your organization.
Yeah, and I think talking, to what Shaq talked about this morning is some of those different breaches you can show like, hey, this could be us. So let's do a brown bag. Let's, do some knowledge sharing and try to make sure we're doing the right thing here.
That's right.
Cool.
And
Well,
your
thank you, Aaron.
vendors too, Mark, your vendors, right?
Yes, and your vendors. I'm very, some of the identity, I'll speak for the identity team. We're pretty active on social media and stuff like that to answer a lot of questions. But yes,
right.
reach out to your account teams and things like that to
Yeah.
do some of that stuff.